What's up? Welcome to Running Things. My name's Riley. I'm your host. I'm also the editor over at tempojournal.com. Pretty sick episode today. We are chatting to double Olympian, 225 marathoner, Commonwealth Games rep, Jess Stenson is chatting to us all the way from Adelaide. If you haven't seen the news in the last 6 months, Adelaide is pretty much utopia right now. They're still training in groups. They're still racing. They're getting it done. So it's going to be pretty sick to chat to Jess about what she's been going through the last couple of months and also kind of what 2021 looks like for her. Jess, as I said, has been to 2 Olympic Games already in the marathon, hasn't really had the chance to run a qualifier for Tokyo, given she gave birth late in 2019. Her marathon in April 2020 in Hamburg was obviously cancelled due to the coronavirus. So it's left Jess in a really weird place where she hasn't had the opportunity to run a time. The window for running qualifying times has been closed most of the year. It reopened with the London Marathon. So athletes now until some point in 2021 will have the opportunity to run a time. So fingers crossed Jess gets the opportunity to do so, as well as other athletes like Millie Clark. Before we jump into the Jess Stenson interview, if you are watching this on YouTube, do us a favor, give us a little subscribe action down there. If you are listening on the pod, make sure you subscribe on your favorite pod service. And also go back and check out some previous episodes. We just had Jess Hull on the show last week. She's amazing. She was chatting to us all the way from her little hotel quarantine in Sydney. And before that, we had Craig Engels, everyone's favorite 1500 meter runner from the US. Enough of that though, let's jump into it. Jess Stenson. Today, we are chatting with marathon OG, 2-time Olympian, all the way over in Adelaide, Jess Stenson. Jess, how are you?
I'm going well, thank you.
Hey, thanks for jumping on the show today. How's things over in SA?
Yeah, not too bad at the moment. Over the last few months, we've had a couple of races, and it's been sort of bizarre because on a world scale, like a lot has been changed, and there aren't races around. But on a local level, we're pretty well back to normal here, so it's been nice.
Speaking of that racing, I mean, we've seen a bit of cross country. We've seen, I think, a 10K on the roads. We saw a half marathon from you recently as well. You're obviously, from looking at the results, you're fit and you're training well. How's everything going for you?
Yeah, look, it's been an interesting year. I mean, giving birth to Billy last November, I sort of thought, if things went well, I'd love to aim for a marathon within that Olympics qualifying period. So I started really working hard throughout mid-January to late April was when the marathon was scheduled in Hamburg that I was going to target, and started ramping up the training. And then obviously COVID, things started to look less and less likely that the race would go ahead, and eventually it was cancelled, and then the Olympics were postponed. And so at that point I decided to just take it a bit easier for a few weeks. So we were actually away in the country when all of the lockdown happened, about 7 hours out of Adelaide. So we ended up staying there for a few weeks, and my husband worked from home, and I just sort of took the running pretty casually while we worked out what was going on, and then I started to increase it again, and by June I think we started having some cross country races. So it's been really nice to have those races still to target, and I guess be able to work on some areas that needed developing after giving birth anyway. So I was planning to sort of really push the envelope and get back to run a marathon, and instead I've been able to take a bit of a breather and just work things back slowly, and as I said, work on particularly abdominal strength and a few things that needed work.
Going all the way back to November, and probably before that, obviously you gave birth to Billy almost a year ago, sort of 11 months ago.
Yeah.
What's it like for somebody like yourself who, as I said, you are a 2-time Olympian, you've run a 225 before, going into the pregnancy and having a due date and stuff like that, how do you figure out, okay, after I have birth, this is how long it's going to take to get back into being able to like run well and to train hard and to race? Like, are there resources? Like, how did you figure out that kind of process for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge process. I think going into 2018, if we take a step back, I was really working hard towards the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast. And then after that result, decided to also target the the Gold Coast Marathon, which took place in early July. So that was a pretty quick turnaround. And my husband and I had decided at the beginning of the year that we wanted to go to Europe and just, I guess, see a bit of the world, have a bit of a different life experience, and also just reflect on what we wanted for the next sort of 5-10 years. It was an opportunity to step out of the usual routine. And so we did that. We were in Europe from July through until October, and I ended up racing the Toronto Marathon on the way home. But while we were away, it was a good opportunity to talk about our goals in and outside of running. And you know, we'd both always wanted to be parents one day and decided that it was time to, I guess, try and start that process. And we knew that if I were to get pregnant quickly or if it took ages, you know, the Olympics might be challenging in 2020, but it was still something really important to us to, try and become parents. And so I found out I was pregnant in February of 2019. And then obviously started to prepare for giving birth in November. And I, as a physio, went and did a maternity women's health physio course. So that taught me a lot. I also chatted to a few coaches and athletes around the place, and an exercise physiologist in Canada who's actually done a bit of work in the area of female athletes, getting back into training postpartum. There isn't a lot of literature out there, and what was out there sort of suggested, you know, you're at a higher risk of bone stress injuries and whatnot in that period after giving birth, particularly if you're breastfeeding, your bone density is a bit lower. And so I learned a lot about the risks and just did everything I could during pregnancy and after giving birth to minimise those risks and be smart, because there was never really a doubt in my mind that I would get back into running at some level. And I'm really fortunate that I had people like, you know, Eloise Wellings and Lisa Waitman and whatnot to chat to who'd, been through that process as well.
Speaking of, you touched on Hamburg. Of course, we were all looking forward to. There's been a lot of anticipation around. I think because women's marathoning in Australia is so strong, right? And there's just such fantastic depth at the moment. Like, especially after seeing how well Lisa has been running and Sinead and Ali, there was a lot of anticipation around, well, hey guys, let's not forget about Jess. She's been there before. Like, is Jess going to get an opportunity to qualify for Tokyo? And so I think we were all obviously excited for Hamburg, and obviously we know that got cancelled. But how were you feeling? You know, you say sort of in sort of January, February. How were you feeling about the idea of going into Hamburg sort of in that, I don't know if condensed time frame is a fair thing to call it, but how did you, I guess, rate your likelihood of running well in Hamburg?
Yeah, it's a funny one. You sort of set that goal and then you really have to focus on 1 week at a time. And I remember in my later weeks of pregnancy, I actually mapped out a bit of a plan and thought, this is the if things go really well scenario, this is if things are taking a bit longer. And after I gave birth via cesarean, and literally the day or two afterwards, I couldn't sit up or turn in bed. I was like, okay, so I'm a fairly long way from my goal at this point. But and then 2 weeks afterwards, I remember at dinner, Dad telling a joke, and I had to tell him to just quit it and stop, being funny, because you actually can't laugh. It was so painful, my abdominal, where the incision had been. And so when you sort of think back to those moments when you're struggling to laugh and to turn, it can be quite daunting thinking you want to run a marathon in 6 months. But things do improve exponentially. And by mid-January, I remember going out with Team Tempo for the first time and just going for a bit of a more sort of structured session. And then by mid-February, starting to feel like I could, I wasn't certainly comparing to pre-pregnancy, but I was noticing quite a lot of progress each week. And it probably wasn't until mid-March that I was feeling like my sessions were starting to hit, a level of intensity that would be comparable to before giving birth. But I hadn't been on any of those really long, hard out efforts. I'd done a few long runs with a pickup towards the end, but it was probably going to be in that final month where I did some really key marathon sessions, and I didn't quite get to the point of doing those really before things started to get a bit out of hand on a worldwide scale. But I guess the difference was that I was incorporating a fair bit more cross-training, elliptical training, as my sort of double supplementary runs. So I felt cardiovascularly fit, but yeah, some of those really long sustained efforts would have been the test as to whether I was conditioned enough. And yeah, didn't get to see it, but I was feeling really open-minded.
It certainly, I mean, it seems like you're well and truly back and feeling like yourself now. I mean, the Adelaide Half Marathon recently didn't look like a quick course, essentially, like pretty typical of an Adelaide sort of road race, pretty sort of twisty and turny. You ran a 72, which I think for the course is obviously a really great time. I mean, your PR's around 70. How did it feel to be back into a longer race? We know you've raced some cross country and some 10K, but something a bit longer must have been nice to sort of stretch the legs.
Yeah, no, it was really exciting. I mean, I think everyone all over the world is pretty thankful when they just get to lace up for a race at the moment. And definitely there was that race day vibe, and I got really nervous the night before, and it was really cool getting up early and heading out to the race, and then seeing Dylan and our baby Billy just before I sort of ran. So I took it on with a bit of a different perspective, I guess, just really happy to be there. And when I saw my family and some friends cheering at the 6 kilometre mark, I was just absolutely buzzing and loving it. And then it started to hurt a fair bit more in the back end because I hadn't sort of had a hard hit out like that in a long while. But it was really good practice, and I think I'll need a few more of those races under my belt just to really get back into the swing of things. And I'm very grateful that Adelaide could host that half marathon and marathon event. So I really enjoyed it.
It was cool reading your race recap that you put together. Like we don't often really hear about pros talking about, the little boost that it gives them to see family out on the course. And the nature of the course is obviously it's a bit smaller because there's no crowds and stuff, but you're able to see your family a couple of times throughout the race. That must kind of take on a bit of extra meaning or a bit of extra sentiment now that you guys have Billy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've always really, I guess, thrived on crowd support, and I love, championship races when you see, if you may be overseas and you literally just see an Aussie flag, and it's hard not to smile and get a bit excited because you just feel this immediate connection, and it reminds you of why you're out there and doing it. I mean, I'd love to run for a number of reasons, but I really love representing, either my country or my squad. It just helps me to really dig deep when I'm doing it for the people who have helped me to get there. So yeah, any races in Adelaide for that reason are really special because you can have a lot of people out there.
Speaking a bit about your training squad, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's because we're not seeing many other training squads being able to train together, but it feels like you guys are building something really special over there with Team Tempo, and it's been great to see, been great to watch all you guys racing, and you've got a really great men's group, but the women's group is maybe even stronger. I mean, with Caitlin Adams and Izzy and yourself, and what's the training environment like, and is it good for you to be around those guys, day in, day out?
It really is. I mean, huge credit to Adam Diddick, who in 2008 basically started Team Tempo, and it was just a few of us. I had sort of made the decision that year to focus more on running. I'd been playing a couple of different sports and mainly netball leading up to that point. And Adam encouraged me to sort of put down my ultimate goals, and, making an Olympic team was one of those big goals. And he just was really excited by that big goal, and gradually, more and more runners started to get amongst the group, and it's evolved into something now that's it's really incredible. And as you say, distance running in SA is going really well at the moment. And traditionally, I've sort of had one or two male training partners that I've worked with in the lead up to a marathon event. So I think I've done 12 marathons now, and it really has usually just been one or two training partners. And now we've got this huge squad, and our long runs on a Sunday morning, you're up to 30 people, I'd say. And
Wow.
Having Izzy and Caitlin and, Sarah Eckel, and now we've got Grace as well, to have this little girl squad. We're really pushing each other because we all individually have different strengths as well, which means that, on any given day, depending on the session, it'll be a different person sort of pushing the pace. And it's, I guess, an environment that's really conducive to us all getting the best out of ourselves. And it's a lot of fun. Hard work, but fun.
And it's it's cool to see as well. Like, I'm obviously here in Melbourne, and we've got, a couple of sort of big dominant groups here. And I remember interviewing Izzy a couple of years ago when she was still at Washington. And, Team Tempo was obviously well and truly established then. And that was kind of the first time that I realized, hey, if you're a South Australian runner, you can stay in South Australia. There's a fantastic, amazing group there. You don't have to move to Melbourne anymore or whatever. And like, that was kind of cemented for me even when we saw Maddie Clark, obviously a really promising steepler from Melbourne, move over to SA to train with Max. It's like, it's and as you say, full credit to Adam for creating really like another great destination for Australian distance running.
Yeah, no, we really are fortunate here. And I was chatting to Max Stevens at training this morning about SA and how even just the regional areas, he was in Clare last weekend, and there's this brilliant, it's the Riesling Trail. So it's sort of the trail that leads people to the different wineries, but it's actually also a really good running trail. And we've got Kaipo Forest if you want sort of some sandy hills. We've got Belair National Park, which is just stunning. It's very green and hilly, and then the Uni Loop, where you've got a post at every 200 metre checkpoint and some really good hills nearby. So what I love is that I live on Linear Park, the Torrens Trail, and I can run either 8 kilometres to Henley Beach and run along the Esplanade, or I can run 6 kilometres into the city. And then if I wanted to keep going for another 20 kilometres, I could, and that's with no traffic light interruptions. So it is a good city for distance runners.
Jess, I want to go back and talk a bit more about the marathon and about, the next, 10, 11 months, whatever. But I want to start by talking about the London Marathon, obviously a race you've done before. And it was on a couple of weeks ago. And I think you put a post up talking about kind of how special it is to watch something like London, given all the memories that you have there. And I know you're a proud Australian and a friend of the other women who are running, but emotionally, how is it for you watching something like that? Because obviously, I know you want women like Sinead and Ali to run well, but at the same time, if they set a fast time, it's just another faster time that you have to try and beat to make the Tokyo team. So, is it a strange thing watching a marathon like that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I have so much respect for Sinead and Ellie. I got to catch up with Sinead in 2015 when she'd made the World Championships team that year, and I remember she was sort of newer onto the distance running scene then, and I just immediately really I just loved the way she went about things. She's organised, she's so modest but so driven. And then I met Ellie for the first time. I'm not exactly sure when, but again, Ellie just exudes that sort of warmth and positivity. And so I really did want the best for them. And I think for me, I'm so driven by I guess, self improvement and PBs. And so I know that I really want to run a personal best. And if I run a personal best and that gets me onto the team, well, that's great. But if I run a personal best and I don't, it's just a sign of really good times in Australia. And to think that I qualified for London in 2012 with a 2:31.12, I mean, it's pretty cool when you look at what time you'd have to run now. So I think for me, I know that I'm going to have to run faster than I've ever run before to make that team. And that's a really good thing. You know, in the marathon event, you've got so many great opportunities to run different marathons around the world. And I would absolutely love to make another Olympic team, but I want to really know that I've obviously deserved to be there. And if other girls have all run faster, well, it's not my year for it. So
what on that, like, and we know, like, you know, it's there's not a lot of certainty anywhere in the world, right, for the next few months. So it's kind of a hard one. But is that something that you've sat down with Adam and looked at, like, okay, here's the calendar for 2021. Like, if we need to find a qualifying race, it's here or it's here. Is that a process you've gone through? Or is it kind of a bit hard to do that at the moment?
Yeah, so back in March when we found out that Hamburg had been postponed, we were madly looking at other opportunities in Australia, and it was sort of like, it was like Canberra, Noosa or something, and we were sort of clutching at straws. And then, you know, next minute the Olympics were postponed, and it was like, okay, we don't need to race to try and find an event here. And then this year, it's really been about just looking at what opportunities are out there and then trying to create contingency plans. So Adam's really looking at next year and making sure we've got some local options available in case overseas races don't open up. So it's a really bizarre feeling. Like, I'm getting all fired up, you know, having watched London Marathon, I'm just sitting in my seat like, oh, I just want to get out there and race. But I've kind of got to just pocket that and not get ahead of myself, because if I started really ramping up the training now for a marathon prep and then didn't have one until April, well, you know, the wheels could fall off. So I've just got to keep working on, you know, some of the areas that need work. And then as soon as we get the green light to start marathon specific prep, I'll be jumping on it.
The Adelaide summer must be pretty tough to marathon train through, I'd imagine.
It is, and in a way it's not such a bad thing to have to prepare in the heat, because obviously if I were fortunate to make the Tokyo Sapporo team, it's going to be a warm one. So I can sort of see some merit to having the option to train in the heat here. But if I have to get up at the crack of dawn, I'm not as scared of that anymore, because I've been doing it a fair bit since Billy's arrived. So yeah, we'll just have to be smart about it and really hydrate and do all of those things.
Something that I'm sure as an athlete you're not too worried about, but it's something that, like, observers of the sport kind of have to think about a little bit, especially now. Like, your last marathon was Toronto at the end of 2018, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember what shoes you wore for that?
Shoes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wore the Tava Zeal at the Tava Zeal 6.
So that would have been like probably one of the last marathons where a top level professional wasn't wearing a shoe with a carbon plate in it, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny, because, like, even doing research for this conversation with you, it's, you know, like, we'd go through and we look at PRs and it's like, okay, Jess has run a high 2:25, but it's like, well, what is that with a carbon shoe, right? Because it has been widely seen as such, like, a game changing thing. Do you look at that and say, okay, I've got to, you know, and realistically, you probably do need to run a PB to make that Tokyo team. Do you think about stuff like that? Like, okay, well, if I can run 2:25 without a carbon shoe, look at this, like, incredible advance in technology in the last 18 months, 2 years or whatever. Is that something that even enters your mind?
I hadn't thought too much about it. I mean, I love that Asics Tava Zil, which became the Tava Edge, and I still do a lot of my sessions in those. But then I popped the Meta Racer on for the State Road 10K champs, and I absolutely loved it. And that's when I got really excited about running a marathon in that shoe. So it seems now that, there are different versions of the Meta Racer available, and there's talk amongst the group. And I mean, it is exciting, just when you put a shoe on and you just feel like you're smooth, and that's how I feel sort of in the Meta Racer. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to try that over a longer distance.
Yeah, for sure. Given you've just run a half a couple of weeks ago, what do the next couple of months look like for you? What does the sort of the lead into December and the lead into Christmas look like from a training perspective?
So the Athletics South Australia summer season has just kicked off, and I think we've got a 5,000 metre race in a few weeks, and then another 5K in early December, and then I think in mid-December we've got a 10K track race. So I'm just going to focus on those track races for now, and hopefully within the next month or two we'll have a bit of a better idea about when a marathon opportunity might might come up. But it is hard when the world's sort of responding to second waves and whatnot. You can sort of think that something's a guarantee, and pretty quickly it suddenly isn't on the cards anymore. So I think everyone around the world's just having to be a lot more adaptable now, and knowing that nothing's sort of set in stone.
I really hope that, I mean, because it's not just yourself who's trying to, obviously it's not just you who's trying to chase a qualifying time. Like we will see track and field nationals in some form next year, I'm sure, because they are so important for the selection of the team. Obviously we don't have the same type of nationals set up for the marathon, but there are so many other athletes who are going to be chasing a time. You've got to think that locally, Athletics Australia, if they have to step in, will step in and make sure there is some kind of elite level race for you guys to have that final opportunity. Is that something that like Adam has talked about, or is that something that you guys have considered?
Yeah, look, I think Adam will certainly be doing everything he can to make sure there is an option for us if we can't travel. I mean, we've got the depth in our country now to do that. In prior years, we sort of probably had, one or two people who would be interested in it, but now we've got, as we spoke about for Sinead, Ellie, there's Lisa, Millie, and a whole handful of women who'd be keen to get in and run a marathon. So if we could all do it in one sort of, whether it be a trial or, just an opportunity to try and run fast times, it's a pretty cool situation to be in.
Yeah, it'd be great for interest in the sport as well. I think it'd be really cool. I think that's one thing the US do really well, is having like Olympic trials and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Before we finish, we have spoken a little bit about Team Tempo, but for us in Melbourne, or for our audience in Sydney or whatever else, talk me through who's someone from Team Tempo that we don't know enough about that we should be watching over this summer season.
Ooh, very good question. I mean, I guess I've spoken about Izzy and Caitlin already, but I'm really excited about what they've got ahead of them. I think another athlete, Sarah Eckel, she does a few sessions with us, but she sort of comes from the shorter end of things, sort of 800, 1500, and she's just such a beautiful mover. I just love watching Sarah run, and we were doing hill reps this morning, and she floats up the hills, and I think she's just still getting that race experience under her belt, but what she can do in training and her just efficiency with movement suggests that when her time comes, she's really going to make her mark. So hopefully it's, in the coming year or two, whether it's the 1500 or 5K, that she'll sort of end up enjoying the most. But Sarah Eckel, one to watch.
All right, nice. That's it's a good tip. Now, I think you'll probably, I don't know, you might have a different answer than most of our guests on the show, given young Billy. In your downtime, like let's say it's off season, or if it's just a quiet night on the couch, What's the number one app used on your phone? What's the app you're always opening on your phone?
Oh, it's Instagram. I love photos. That's definitely my most used app because I've always loved photos, and I guess I love people, and it's fun just seeing what, particularly during this phase where you haven't been able to see people in person as much, you can still sort of see what people have been up to. And then other than that, for a little while there, I had some of the baby apps and whatnot, but now I'm just sort of rolling with it, with whatever Billy's doing and enjoying his milestones and the fact that he's about to start walking. And he's certainly keeping us very busy. So we don't actually have that much time sort of sitting on the couch anymore, but it's for a good reason.
How, actually, that's another question I had. How has Billy's kind of schedule or demands, for lack of a better word, how has that kind of impacted both of your sort of training schedules? Has it been like, is there a fair bit of juggling going on to make sure like everyone gets to do the training they need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really fortunate that Dylan's very supportive, and he sort of tries to, help me as much as possible, whether it be I get up really early and, Dylan reminds me to change my whereabouts and things like that, because my whereabouts out. He's always onto those things. But I sort of will train first thing, and then Dylan usually can get his session out during his lunch break at work, which is awesome because then he gets home and I go for my second run, and then we have that crazy sort of hour where we're trying to get Billy fed and bathed and dressed, and then we can have a bit of time to catch up at the end of the day. So it's pretty action packed, but certainly we laugh so much. Billy's he's a fair old character. He cracks us up a lot, and so I guess that's just nice. It adds that kind of light-heartedness to each day when training can be intense. Sometimes you don't hold on to things for too long. If you've had a bit of a rough session, it's soon forgotten, and
I was going to say it probably helps with like a bit of perspective, right? Around like running is really important. Of course, it's your career, but like, there are other things in life as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Jess, amazing to have you on. I wish it hadn't taken this long for us to get you on this show. I think, like I might have said to you earlier in the week, like you are like of all the people that other people ask me about, whether it's when I'm out for a run with someone or an email I get or a message I get, everyone's always asking me like about you. And I think because they see Ali and Sinead and they think, well, what about when's Jess going to get a chance to run? Is Jess going to make the team? And like, it is really interesting. And I hope, and I'm sure you will get that opportunity. And I think we're all really excited to see kind of what you do with that opportunity when the time comes. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you do. I honestly just love seeing the photos you put up and the interviews that you've had with athletes. I've really enjoyed listening to them and watching them. So, thank you for what you do for our sport.
Well, hopefully we'll get over to Adelaide at some point when we're allowed to come over.
Soon.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Riley.
I hope you guys enjoyed that chat with Jess Stenson. We will put some cool links in the show notes, including to Jess's own website where she shares race reports and stuff like that. I think I mentioned that in the interview. We'll also put you onto Team Tempo if you're not familiar. As far as like Australian elite groups, if you're going to follow one, it's Team Tempo. The content they create, the information they put out on their own page, it's amazing. It's really well done. As someone who likes aesthetics and design, it's certainly a good time, and you'll have some fun there. So check that out. That's it for the show today, guys. We will see you next time, and keep your easy days easy. Thanks so much for watching Running Things here on YouTube. If you haven't already, do us a favor, hit that little subscribe button. It really helps out our channel. Also, tell your friends, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram @Tempo Journal.